Hi, Lacrosse fans. Welcome back to episode number 17 of the Sticks and Picks Lacrosse podcast presented by Lacrosse Unlimited. Lacrosse Unlimited has provided the best equipment, apparel, and lacrosse footwear since 1990. You can check out their website at lacrosseunlimited.com for all your lacrosse needs. There you will find all the game's top brands, including True Lacrosse. Stay tuned until the end of the episode to find out more on how you could win the new True Vector lacrosse head. I'm your host, Will Petchnick, alongside co-host Jake Fox. In today's episode, we talk to Kyle Jackson, a young star and one of the game's best social media personalities. We talk about growing up in a small town lacrosse community and the sacrifices and time commitment needed to get to the next level. He shares some awesome stories from his lacrosse career so far, and he talks about how awesome it is to live in Halifax and to play in front of their amazing fan base. A product of Sarnia Minor Lacrosse, he has turned himself into one of the most recognizable players in the National Lacrosse League. A former first-round pick in the NLL, he has engraved his name all over the Michigan University record books. He's currently a member of the Halifax Thunderbirds and Boston Cannons. Please welcome Kyle Jackson.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, KJ, how you doing?
Phenomenal. I mean, a lot of workouts are being taking place here in quarantine and to hang out with my wife, which is not always something that we get to do with all the travel that goes on with lacrosse. So we're sticking to some workouts and having some fun here.
I saw you have a nice little wall ball area in your house now. You found a wall.
Yes, I'm fortunate enough that we have about 20-foot ceilings in our apartment. So there's one just ginormous wall that I can hum the ball off of.
That's awesome. We're glad you can stay closer to your wife now and kind of catch up with some family life. We're going to get into things here and kind of talk about how you got started with the game of lacrosse. I know you grew up in Sarnia, Ontario, and it's not one of the hotbeds in Ontario for lacrosse, but can you kind of talk about how you got involved in the game of lacrosse?
Definitely not a hotbed. I mean, they used to have a pretty great, actually, Junior A lacrosse team way back when, and then transitioned to Junior B and all that stuff. But definitely not a hotbed. Had to travel a lot for lacrosse growing up. But I was literally thrown into the game because I was 3 years old and it was the only sport that I could sign up for. And so that's how I got into the thick of things. And like I said, anytime that I wanted to really play any competitive lacrosse at a higher level, it was driving 2-3 hours at minimum just to kind of get somewhere. And that's kind of how I ended up in Kitchener.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of, being from Ottawa, especially in our times, it was kind of the same where you had to drive 2-3 hours, 4 hours to get to Toronto to play competition. What were some of your best memories playing minor? I can imagine some of the road trips were probably pretty fun.
Yeah, there was a lot of times with just my dad and I driving back and forth and a lot of late nights. I mean, junior lacrosse, I was literally getting home at 2-3 in the morning, depending on how long I took to get out of the locker room. And that would affect how fast my dad had to drive on the way home. But then go right back to school the next morning at 8 o'clock. And so those were long days. But I mean, like you just said, having to drive that far just to play the game of lacrosse, you get to have a lot of stories on the way. And it ends up being just kind of little things with close ones, whether it's family, relatives, or a couple good buddies here or there that you're carpooling with, that not a lot of people are going to understand, that you just kind of have with that significant other.
When you were in minor, who was someone who really kind of helped you get kind of learn the game and stuff? And maybe it was a coach that kind of really taught you how to play the game properly? Or was it one of those things where you had to wait till junior?
No, Sean Kennedy, it was definitely one of them. Jamie Maness were two guys that even to this day I stay in great contact with. Jamie Maness, who's a tremendous friend of my dad's, and I'm actually the godparent to one of his youngest daughters. And it's pretty exciting to kind of have those relationships still moving forward in life and knowing that those are long lasting. But those are two guys that always push me to kind of branch out outside of Sarnia lacrosse, just because there was so much more out there. And I mean, Jamie had played in Six Nations, some senior lacrosse and whatnot, so he had experienced a little bit. But it really was due to those two that pushing me outside of Sarnia just to kind of experience what more lacrosse had to offer.
Yeah, certainly. And you talked about it there with junior lacrosse going to KW. Can you kind of talk about that travel, what it was like for you to go back and forth? I'm assuming you lived in Sarnia when you were in your early junior career. So can you kind of talk about that travel that you had to go through for that?
Yeah, I mean, I was finishing high school at, let's say, 2:00, whatever it may have been. And then I was always participating in some other sport. So whether it was badminton, tennis, basketball, volleyball, I was doing something after. And so I'd finish that and then drive right to Kitchener on like a Wednesday for a practice. At the time, I was a rookie and doing anything that I could to make a team. So if I had to drive 2 hours, that's what I was going to do. And I obviously at that time didn't have my license when I started playing junior. So it meant my dad driving me all the way there and all the way back after he was done work. So like I said, long days, but we would go there and travel all the way to Kitchener. And that was the closest franchise that was to Sarnia at the time. It's kind of a funny backstory. I was actually drafted by Whitby when the draft came and went, and Riley O'Connor, who I went to high school with and I'm great friends to this day with, his dad was the one who had put in a good word with Keenan and said, hey, you should draft this guy. Keenan had absolutely no idea who I was. I didn't have any name at the time. And Keenan had basically worked and coached with Jeremy Talevi, who was the coach in Kitchener, but they were working in Edmonton together. And Jeremy was a field lacrosse coach in London at the time, and I had played for him before. And Jeremy basically said, hey, Keenan, like this guy's never going to be able to make any of your games. Just basically throw me a bone and trade him to Kitchener. And so Keenan, without thinking anything of it, just up and shipped me off to Kitchener.
For a bag of balls or for a case of water bottles? Or?
I still don't know the trade to the date, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was even less than that.
You played all 5 years at KW. Talk about kind of that experience as a 16-year-old going to your first junior A training camp. I remember mine, and it's a young man against grown-ass men, and kind of get your ass kicked the first time you go out.
It's extremely humbling. And at the time, I was probably 150 pounds, so I'm not much heavier to this date. But back then, being 150 pounds and playing against guys that had been playing at a high caliber of lacrosse their whole entire lives was extremely, extremely humbling.
Your KW teams were actually pretty good. You had guys like Dane Smith, Chris Cloutier, you had Orly and Net, a bunch of guys who have gone on to play in the NLL now. What was that experience like, kind of seeing all you guys kind of start together and now playing against each other in the pros?
It was kind of cool because aside from Dane, none of us had really had a name. And I mean, Dane had been playing professional lacrosse, I think, for 3 years of his junior career, 2 years, whatever it may have been. And so that was pretty cool to get to live and learn through him and know what the NLL lifestyle was like and how demanding it was. But then also to have guys like Orly and Klutch really grow in the Kitchener pipeline and kind of see them develop and grow up to be lifelong friends at the end of the day, and know that we all kind of started from the same roots where we were really nobodies playing for Kitchener, and then ended up, obviously, Chris had a phenomenal career. The guy scores an NCAA championship goal in overtime. Like, little things like that where you look back on it and have those memories of playing junior lacrosse with those guys. And now when you look back on it, it's pretty cool.
You were captain for your last 2 years of junior, I think, right?
Something like that. I was captain over Dane. I think that's all that anybody needs to know.
We'll talk about being the captain in junior, because obviously it's different than being captain at basically any other level. What was those responsibilities like?
My experience, I think, was even a little bit different than most because I didn't live in Kitchener and most of the guys did. And they'd also grown up being really good friends their whole lives because they had played together for so long. And then myself, I was always driving in and driving out. And by my last year of junior, I didn't even really have to go to those Wednesday practices that we had because the drive was just too much. So you're basically being a captain of a group of guys who are best friends and you're kind of the outsider. So then those times when you do show up, you've got to assert yourself, but also not too much where you're stepping on people's toes where, like I said, they've all been best friends forever. They're going to stick together and you're the outlier. So for me, I've always just kind of prided myself on doing the right things and making sure that my game speaks for itself so that if somebody does have a question or they want to argue with me on something, they know that I'm not asking them to do anything that I wouldn't do myself.
What were some of the memories that really stapled yourself, like that you remember to this day about playing junior? I know everyone probably has the bar scene ones, but sometimes we can't share those. But what are some memories that really, like, you think back and you're like, damn, that was fun in junior?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a little tough, like I said, because I was always in and out. So even those late night stories I didn't always get, even traveling from the hill, like I was going right after a game, I was going back to the dorms at the Hill because I had school the next day, and I didn't just have that 5-minute commute back to my house. So those, I mean, everyone has, like you said, has their bar stories. I had a couple of those, but for me, I think one of the lasting stories that I'll always have was just more in game, where for some stupid reason, someone had told me growing up, because I was smaller, in order to be effective in junior, I was going to need to like basically run around with my stick to protect myself if guys ever did anything. So I was constantly running with my stick up, pointed like a spear at people's face. And so anytime that I would go to the middle, I was constantly jabbing guys in the throats. And I was just sitting there being naive, thinking that I was protecting myself if something happened. But then what ended up happening is game after game after game, I just kept getting jumped because I was spearing people in the throat. So I don't think that a lot of people have great memories of me from my junior career, because they know me as this little pesky guy who was just jabbing people in the throat with their stick. But yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, you were a smaller guy in your junior career, but you need to protect yourself. So I think you could just leave it at that at the end of the day. So we're going to have some fun here. We're going to do our word association game. So I explained this earlier to you. So basically, Jake's going to give you a word, and you got to think of someone in the lacrosse world that first comes to mind for you. You can explain it, or you don't have to if you don't want to.
Okay.
Your first word is GOAT, greatest of all time.
John Grant Jr.
All right. The next one is goal scorer.
Cody Jamieson.
Figured that one was coming. It's fitting. Playmaker.
Cody Jamieson.
Tough.
Tough. Luke Magnon. A low ball one there where guys probably don't know a whole lot about it, but that guy, I mean, one, he's kind of in a story even crazier than everybody else, being from Manitoba. Like, he had to go through some grueling transitions in playing field lacrosse, box lacrosse, higher levels, and all that. So that he's been through a lot, and he's one of the toughest guys I know.
Detail oriented.
Geez, these are good.
Why do you sound so surprised, KJ?
Micah Kersey.
That's a good one. Passionate.
I'm going to go with Cody Jamieson again. I think that a lot of these it speaks for himself. Like, and I had always grown up watching him, but then playing with him, like, I'm saying his name because those things are exactly what he resembles.
Next one's funny.
Oh, Warren Hill, without a doubt.
Yeah, I get that. Legacy. That's a Hill Academy word.
Yeah, it seriously is. I'm going to go with Brody Merrill and the Merrill family because, I mean, they are one of the key components to where I am today. And without the school that their whole entire family's built, a lot of us aren't playing at the professional level that we are.
No, it's absolutely true. The next word's brick wall.
Warren again, because I think his game spoke for itself this year. The guy was all over the place making save after save, and we were down multiple times by 5 or 6 goals, and he kept us in games.
The next word is agitator.
Oh, Graham Hossack, in a sneaky little way, because he makes goalies mad with how disgusting his shot is.
And the last word, I ended every time with this word because it's my favorite word, jackass.
Oh, geez. I'm going to say the Dawson brothers because I don't know who it is, but one of them used to apparently play pretty good pranks on everybody. And so I'm going to say one of those guys.
That's awesome. We're going to talk about your NCAA career at Michigan. I know you went to the Hill Academy. Can you kind of talk about how the Hill prepped you for your NCAA career and talk about why you decided to go to Michigan and how that process came along?
Definitely. I ended up at the Hill literally because Bill Greer was playing at the time with Patrick Merrill, and Patrick had basically asked Bill, hey, do you have anybody on your Kitchener team that would be interested in coming to our school? And Bill had put my name forward, and I think I might have been a rookie at the time and really hadn't made a name for myself at all. And Patrick kind of took a chance on me, had me visit the campus. long story short, I ended up at the Hill Academy, and then that's where I ended up kind of building my game into more of a defensive midfielder role at the time, really. There were so many great players at the school that it was tough to even crack the offensive roster. And so I played a lot of defense. And then afterwards, ended up at Michigan. I wanted a school that was as far away from home as possible and as small of a school as possible because the Hill was close to my home, sort of, but it was also a really small school. And so I wanted the opposite and the same. But I ended up at Michigan that had arguably one of the largest schools in the entire country and as close to home as possible. It was one highway, one exit, and I was at the school.
So you went there in 2013. The team had just gone up to D1 in 2012. So what was that process like coming into a team that had been clubs since I believe the 1940s and then making that jump coming into D1?
It was kind of crazy. I actually spoke to the Michigan lacrosse team a couple of days ago about this, and my class especially, we explain it to everybody this way, is that we got the best of college lacrosse and college all in the same experience because, like you said, we were club, and at the time they were winning national championships, and the Michigan lacrosse team they were the cool kids on campus. They had the best parties to go to. They were the most famous out of all the sports players aside from football. And so everyone wanted to be with the lacrosse team. Anytime you went to a bar, you skip the line, you go right in. Anytime there was a Saturday party, it was usually hosted by the lacrosse team. And so we got that whole club lacrosse lifestyle where lacrosse was kind of secondary to the partying, and then started to transition into our second, third, fourth year where we started to build a culture at Michigan that was more catered toward the Division I lifestyle. And we started to wean out those club lacrosse players. Not that they didn't belong by any means, but they had gone to Michigan and played lacrosse under the expectation they're going to be playing club lacrosse. And then to all of a sudden transition into Division I, you've got a lot of guys that don't necessarily fit in, but also aren't there for the right reasons, which is perfectly okay. But it was year 3 or 4 until we really started to get that Division I culture and mindset instilled in people. So it was a really cool experience because, like I said, I got the best of every single college experience you possibly could.
Would you say that was kind of the biggest learning curve for your team, was getting used to that D1 lifestyle from the club lifestyle?
Definitely. Not that we would have guys resenting going to practice, but you always have kind of people like that who, as soon as practice is over, they just can't wait to go out and do something else. And we would have that mentality at the start of practice, not exactly the end. And so you're sitting there, and I think we might have won one game in my freshman year. I went with the expectation that it was going to be hard and it was going to be difficult, and I wasn't going to be winning national championships. But like the Hill Academy, I went there trying to build something from the ground up, and that's exactly what I wanted at Michigan too. So being able to start a program right from the bottom is a pretty special experience. And then I think that transitioned great into being here now in Halifax, and again, growing something from the ground up.
For sure. But if we look, you definitely left a legacy. I think you're basically top 3 in all the stats. I think Brett Noseworthy kind of took over a lot of the number ones. And
oh yeah.
But talk about kind of, again, leaving your legacy on that program. Like, you're probably now one of the most, if not the most recognizable Michigan lacrosse player.
I think that it was important to me to leave something obviously better than what I went in with. And that's one, building a culture around Division I lacrosse at Michigan that could be sought after, make sure that people wanted to go there. I think an example of that right now is Josh Sawada, who he went to the Hill Academy. He lived with me. He had committed to Q's and just wasn't sure what he wanted to do. And one of his questions to me after he had decommitted was, is Michigan going to win a national championship? And what I told him was I firmly believe that they will. They're at a point now where they could do something great in the next 4 years. And when he heard that from me, he said, okay, no brainer, I'll go to Michigan. And I think that that's something important because without the growth of the club guys, first of all, transitioning into Division I lacrosse and John Paul being there and actually helping bring that program to play Division I, and then having guys go through all those growing pains like myself, I think that that's super important to make sure that they are where they are today. And I mean, yourself, you went to Johns Hopkins. You're at a totally different avenue in the lacrosse realm than what I was in college. which again, perfectly okay. But I wanted something that was just totally outside of the ordinary, and that when I was done there, I was going to do absolutely everything I could to play 4 years and make sure that when I left, people were going to know who I was.
No, I'll say this for Michigan. Their program has done extremely well the last past years and has grown exponentially. I remember when I first got on campus, Michigan was kind of seen as almost a tune-up game in a way. I don't want to like disrespect in any way, but just the caliber you guys were at that point, it was really, if we shut down KJ, we'll let Ian King kind of try and play with the ball in the stick. And now it's become where, holy shit, we have to make sure like we're ready for this team. Like they got shooters everywhere. They're a great team. So you've definitely left a legacy and grown to the point where the top end recruits are now looking at Michigan, especially with their facilities and everything. And winning Big Ten championship there, the facilities, I think we had the women's locker room and it was absolutely incredible. So what Michigan done has grown exponentially. You won a bunch of awards, although a mutual friend of ours, Gerald Logan, beat you out on a lot of MVP awards. Well, one you got was the weight room warrior. Talk about that, because I know that probably starts at the Hill with Dan Noble, who's still with you in Halifax. Talk about that award for you personally and how important you take that stuff, because I know that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny award because I did get it at the Hill too, but it wasn't something that I was eagerly seeking at Michigan. Like I wasn't trying to win the weight room warrior. But something that I tell people even to this day is that one thing that, not that I regret, but if I can give any advice, the game of lacrosse especially, if you can do your best to stay in any type of tip-top shape conditioning-wise, you're going to be so much better off than everybody else. And it's so easy, especially right now, to just kind of sit on the couch and do nothing for a week or so. But then when you start to get back into the swing of things, it's absolutely miserable. And so for me in college, it was literally just never give myself that opportunity to get out of shape. And that, if that meant pushing a little bit more weight in the weight room or running a couple extra sprints after practice, then by all means, that's what I was going to do. And I didn't win it, I think, until my senior year, but the summer going into my senior year and then all of senior year was a drastic change for me. I had to stay for summer school, and so I was constantly with the workout coach there, having to basically do everything on my own. And then I also broke my foot my senior year, and I didn't really get to play that many games, and I just missed out on being able to redshirt. So it was kind of a crazy year, and I was kind of forced to just work out a lot more than I was used to.
The one last thing I'll ask is, because when you were there, they didn't have that new lacrosse/soccer stadium. You played all your games in the big house. How
Correct.
was that experience?
I mean, it was phenomenal. Like you'd go on a Saturday and you'd be in front of 115,000 people cheering on a football team. And then the next day, mind you, there's 2,000 to 5,000. We actually drew a really good crowd. Like at Michigan, you can see, if you look where at the tunnel where everybody comes out, there's a painted block M. And for virtually every single game that we ever played there, that entire block M was covered, which it would take about 3,000 to 5,000 people to really cover that. And you're not playing in front of that many people, not in front of 115,000, but to really only share, the only people that shared the big house were Michigan football and Michigan lacrosse. Aside from that, nobody else got to play there. So to be able to share that with that group was pretty special.
Did you guys ever have like the spring ball game beforehand and then the kind of carryover?
We did against Ohio State. I think we had it maybe 1 year. I think we played Ohio State 2 years and there 1 year. Ohio State got a ridiculously large crowd. I mean, for us, it wasn't exactly the same. We weren't Ohio State lacrosse at the time, and they actually beat them for the first year this year, which was kind of crazy. But we did have that 1 year, and it was really cool. There definitely weren't that many people, but it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, certainly. And I know Jake touched on it a little bit there, talking about Brent Noseworthy. He's an Ontario lacrosse player as well, and he's in the NLL with the Buffalo Bandits right now. I'm sure both you guys know this, but I don't think a lot of people know that he was actually the best box lacrosse goalie at his age group growing up in minor lacrosse. And he played with me on Team Ontario for my 2 years there. And it's just crazy to see how well he's doing today and the career he had at Michigan. So that's just my fact for all you lacrosse fans out there. So we're going to go into your NLL career. You were drafted 7th overall to the Rochester Nighthawks in 2016. Can you kind of talk to us about that draft experience and what it meant to you and your family?
Definitely. I was projected actually like 35th or 36th in that draft. And reason being mainly, I mean, not mainly, but I didn't really get to play a whole lot of box lacrosse the year before because I was at summer school. And then I also broke my foot my senior year. So I hadn't really played a whole lot. And then when I went to the draft, I really had no expectations. And when they called my name, my parents kind of tapped me on the shoulder and were like, "Did you really just get called?" Like, I had absolutely no idea. The last thing I expected was to be called that early on, but extremely thankful and obviously honored to be picked by Kurt Stiers at the then Rochester Nighthawks, and to be able to take my career there because they obviously had a pretty historic couple years, winning 3 championships just a couple years before I even got there. So heading in there, it was kind of a crazy situation. And at the time, Cody was hurt. And so he was kind of iffy whether he was going to be playing that season or not. And we also had Dan Dawson. And when I went in, they literally had said, "Hey, you're not really going to have to touch the ball at all this year. You'll just go in and set picks. And that's about it. Those guys are going to take 90% of the ball carrying percentage, and you're just going to run around out there." So I said, "Okay, perfect." And then season comes around, game 1, Cody isn't playing, and we didn't really have any lefties at the time. So I went from being told you don't have to carry the ball at all to, okay, you're going to have to carry the ball pretty much every single shift.
Oh, I love it. And we could thank those stats to the old Stamper stats. I love Stamper, but sometimes they're a little off. But again, that's just journalism. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Yeah, like you kind of mentioned it, you stepped in like first year as a rookie, stepped in as a full-time player. Again, talk about that jump because, again, you hadn't really played much senior at the time. You played one game, I think, with KW and a couple games with Coburg. So talk about jumping into basically playing against the best players in the world right away and kind of what your first game was like in the NLL.
I think the best way to explain it is I basically set myself up, not for success, but for that exact situation when I went to Kitchener and wanted to play junior A lacrosse and was playing against guys who were much older than me, much more skilled than me, but also very, very young at the time. And then also going to Michigan and knowing that I wanted to play my freshman year and play every single year, therefore. And I got to do that. So I was constantly jumping into these situations where I might not have been at the skill level that I needed to be, but I was also going to make sure that there was no one who was going to outcompete me to take that spot. And so then transitioning to the NLL, having that same mentality and really have gone living it the last couple of years, I knew that all I had to do was work as hard as I possibly could and make sure that no one outworked me, and I was going to be perfectly okay.
You did something also that a lot of people don't know is you were one of, if not the youngest PLPA rep for Rochester at the time. I believe you started your second year.
Second year, yeah, and it was just mainly Dylan Evans was kind of transitioning out, and he was playing for another team at the time, and they needed a PLPA rep from Rochester. And at the time, he had kind of just thrown my name in, thought that I had done a good job communicating with the guys previously, and thought I'd be a good rep there. And I kind of got thrown into the fire, but it's really cool to see the back end of what goes on in NLL contracts and NLL negotiations and all that stuff. It's also very overwhelming. And you're also relying on basically your word to kind of get out to the rest of your team in the sense that, hey, what I'm saying I think is the best thing for us because I've sat through these endless meetings for 2, 3, 4 hours and taken notes, and I've done the best that I possibly can to understand what's happening and then translate that to guys who haven't jumped on a call, don't really have any idea what's going on, and try and make the best executive decision for everybody. So it's pretty cool to, like I said, see that back end.
More recently now, obviously, with Rochester moving to Halifax, you've relocated yourself and your now new wife, Dana, who's with the team as well, to Halifax. Talk about living in Halifax, kind of the first year, although it was cut short, and just how lacrosse in Halifax has grown and the fan base there, because it's really similar to what you see in Saskatchewan, where there's no other pro sports teams there. So everyone kind of engulfs themselves around the Thunderbirds.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The fan base is absolutely incredible. And we started off with a scrimmage where we had right around 6,500 fans at a free of admission charge to come to the game, literally because no one knew what lacrosse was. It's a really small niche out here in the lacrosse community, and we had to offer it up to people and just say, hey, come check this out. I know you don't know what you're coming to, but we promise once you watch, you're going to fall in love and you're going to want to come every single game that we have. So when we first got here, it was literally going to communities and just explaining what we were offering. You'd have to say lacrosse, they'd say, what's lacrosse? So then you'd have to explain the game and what it is, but then you'd also have to explain what at the professional level you're bringing to the city. And that's music throughout the whole course of a game. That's basically the NBA combined with hockey, combined with football and all these different sports. And you can explain it to people as best as you can, but until they get out and experience a game, they're going to have no idea. But we were fortunate enough that people did show up. They fell in love. And every single game that we had, the fan base just grew and grew and grew. And obviously tough that the season got cut short, and hopefully we can get some playoff games in here and some home games. But by the end, we were right around 10,000 people. So you go 6,500 to 10,000 with 6 or 7 home games. That's pretty good in your first year.
Talk about also the impact that you've seen Halifax have on Nova Scotia lacrosse, because I can imagine having guys like you. I think Colton Armstrong was down there for a little bit working there too. How has Nova Scotia lacrosse kind of levitated to you guys?
It's been great. Again, everything being cut short is really tough because the word that we were getting was that lacrosse in Nova Scotia, all the registration numbers had skyrocketed this year, which is obviously exactly what you want, bringing a new franchise to a new market. You want to see that growth in the youth levels because ultimately you want to have them fall in love with the game and then build an academy and a junior Thunderbirds academy around them so that they can grow up in the pipeline, hopefully grow up to one day play for the Thunderbirds. And I think that's one of the coolest aspects is that now these kids have something to look forward to and see that they can make a profession out of it in their hometown and they don't have to go too far to achieve that.
What's been your favorite thing about Halifax so far? What have you and Dana really jumped into?
Any type of food, any seafood. We've had 0 bad meals since we've been here. And anybody that comes, the first thing they do is when the team gets here, even the away team, they stop at the Marriott where they're staying and they grab a bowl of chowder because the seafood out here is remarkable.
Yeah, I'm sure it is remarkable, and it's exciting to see how well you guys did this season. It's unfortunate that the season did get cut short, but it's also really incredible to see the growth of lacrosse in Nova Scotia and just the growth of the game itself in Canada. So it's awesome to see, and it's awesome that you had such a big part in the success of the Thunderbirds this season. So we're going to have a little bit more fun here. We're going to do our this or that game. Jake's going to give you 2 options. You got to pick one. You can explain why, or you don't have to. It's up to you.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Box or field lacrosse?
Box.
Chocolate or candy?
Candy.
Breakfast or dinner?
Breakfast.
Rochester or Halifax?
Halifax.
Well, sorry, old Rochester or Halifax?
Halifax.
Inside dunk or outside rip?
Inside dunk.
Liquor store or beer store?
Ooh, I say like almost neither. I've only started drinking wine just as more of a classiness aspect to my life and give me something to do. But going back to the NLL draft, I told myself I wasn't going to drink, and I never really drank before, but told myself I wasn't going to drink until I made an NLL team, and that just kind of transitioned into me not really partaking in alcoholic beverages from that point on.
There you go. Nice, clean lifestyle. Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix, although we bought, I don't know if you can even say it, maybe legality purposes, we bought a VPN blocker so that we can access Hulu and all that other good stuff.
Country or rap music?
Country.
The Big House or Scotiabank Arena in Halifax?
Oh, wow. Can I plead the 5th on that one? Let's say both. We're going to say both.
Game-winning goal or game-winning assist?
Game-winning assist is way cooler. I've been on the receiving end of the game-winning goal a lot more, though, unfortunately.
Cottage life or city life?
City life right now. I want cottage life in the future. That's where I'd like to settle down.
Oh, that's awesome. We're going to talk about your MLL career. You're drafted by the Boston Cannons. Do you want to talk a little bit about the transition from the NCAA field game into the MLL game?
Definitely. It's another very parallel story to the rest of my life. I had no real name for myself going into the MLL. And at the time, obviously, there weren't the two leagues. So the league was just absolutely stacked. And Boston kind of just picked me up. I don't even know, more of just because I think Brody probably even had a great say in that, and just being like, hey, this kid went to my school, just take him, because he was there at the time. So maybe that's how I ended up there. But I've grown into a tremendous relationship with everybody in Boston over the last couple of years, and really lucky that Dana's virtually whole family is kind of from that Boston area or right around there. So for me, I mean, even though there are the two leagues, like it makes a lot of sense family wise. It's a huge component of my life, and I'm a really big family man. So being able to just travel and go on a weekend to Boston and be able to take Dana and see her family and hang out there has been awesome. But again, they just kind of took a chance on me, and lucky enough that that whole mentality in my life, just making sure I don't let anyone outwork me, is kind of transitioned throughout, and fortunate enough to hopefully get another season with them this year.
Yeah, one thing, like you said, when you started, there was only the one league. Now there's two pro leagues. Kind of talk about the growth of the MLO you've seen, especially last year being the first year with the division, and talk about kind of the realignment now of everything kind of going to the Northeast and kind of localizing itself, and kind of what you see for the success of the future of the MLL.
Honestly, it's really cool, if I'm being honest. I mean, to have everything kind of be in that central location, it speaks a lot to kind of Connecticut in general in that area, because now a lot of teams are really close to that. And when you think of field lacrosse and you think of high caliber field lacrosse, you're right in that Massachusetts, Connecticut area anyway. So that's really cool. Then to also have a team out in Denver, it speaks magnitudes to kind of the transition of where lacrosse is going. But having the two teams is kind of crazy in the sense that the MLL's really stepped up their game, and they've put in a lot of effort into making sure that the players are happy. And I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, players aren't going to want to play somewhere that they're not having an enjoyable time. And Boston has thrown a ton of money into the organization, building us a state-of-the-art home facility with an immaculate stadium for us to play at, that has the Boston Cannons logo ingrained in the turf, and everything around it, sponsorship wise, is for the Cannons. And so that's really cool. And then even this year, we go out and we get guys like Brian Cole, Randy Stats, and we just stack our team to no end. And we get Matt Gilray on the D end. And I mean, hopefully that we can get back to the thick of things here, because I think the Cannons, especially with everything we did in the offseason, it's a pretty remarkable team.
We'll have to hold that phone call till later there. The next thing I want to ask you about, though, is you actually scored your first 2-point goal. And I know you pretty decently. And I would say you have the hardest shot in the world, but how'd that one feel? It must have been pretty nice to get one from behind the arc.
It was actually awesome and kind of funny too, because I had been joking around with everybody all year. You said it perfectly. Like, I'm not an outside shooter, especially at the 2-point arc. And so all year I just basically joke around with guys saying, I'm gonna hit a 2-pointer, I'm gonna hit a 2-pointer. And in practice, we do the 2-point shooting drill, and we'd catch a pass from the coach, and instead of shooting the 2-pointer, I'd take 15 steps inside the 2-point arc and make sure I buried a shot just for the sake of it. But in the Atlanta game, when I hit the 2-pointer, the whole game I basically was like, hey, give me the ball. I'm gonna shoot a 2-pointer. And we were lucky enough that we were up a couple goals at the time, but I just kept making sure that guys fed me the ball outside the 2-point arc, because I was making sure I hit one.
That's awesome. It's for sure. It's crazy how far out the arc is. And for lacrosse fans who don't understand the field game, it's pretty impressive to score from that 2-point arc. So we're going to talk a little bit about your social media here, and you kind of have a big presence on social media. Do you want to talk to us about how you got into YouTube and kind of why you did it?
Definitely. It's kind of a special story in the sense that lacrosse is a community where you're not at the NHL, and you're not in the MLB, and you really have to make a name for yourself at the end of the day. And it comes down to a lot of self-branding, which is great, and it also isn't, because like I said, you don't have that NHL mantra behind you where you're just playing games and you can focus on that, and people are going to start to understand who exactly you are. In the lacrosse community, you have to branch out and you have to make yourself vulnerable to the social media world and that social complex, because if you're not, you're just going to be playing the game. And for all of us at the end of lacrosse, what we want to be able to do is have a sustainable job and make a living for ourselves. And even during the lacrosse experience that we do get to have while we're playing, you need to have something else that you can lean on in order to make a sustainable living. And so for me, that was just making sure that I put myself in the most uncomfortable position, which was to the world. And that's YouTube, social media, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be, doing my best to make sure that I put a name out there for myself and help try to grow my brand as much as possible.
How much influence does your wife have helping you in this?
Ridiculous amount. She's way better at everything than I am. And it's kind of funny. We started our own podcast. It's called Coffee with Kyle. And it's the two of us just kind of sitting down and talking. And it's cool because in a situation where you're married to somebody, you don't always talk about everything, and you go about your day and you're doing whatever. And for us, it more so just started off as a way to communicate and just talk about things and kind of reflect on a bunch of different stuff. And I mean, obviously what you guys are doing is great, and being able to just reach out to people and converse with them. And obviously everybody has their own way of reaching out. And for us, being able to just sit down and talk and put that out to the world is pretty cool. But she has way more of a social media presence. And going back to my point, I touch on it in the podcast that, like, when I first started talking to her, she was asking me about how to create YouTube videos and all this stuff, and just really having a conversation with me. And I say, not that I looked at how many likes she got or how many followers she had at the time, but like, she was averaging thousands of likes at the time on photos and had way more followers than I did. And so she was kind of that, like that person who she was way too good for me. Like, there was no way this person was going to communicate and want to have a conversation with me because she was way too cool. So I kind of lucked out.
The other thing I want to mention is your suit game, because you take a lot of pride in what you wear and how you look. So does she have a lot of influence in that? Is that kind of your personal style? How's that come along?
That's pretty much all me. I dressed her as much as I humanly can, because if it was up to her, she'd have the most ridiculous outfit on the world in. So that's really on me. And it's kind of a challenge in the sense that obviously we play the game of lacrosse, so we're not making millions and millions of dollars. So trying to find suits and outfits that are attainable to absolutely anybody, but also are fashionable and make you look good. Because at the end of the day, look good, feel good, play good. It's not always the case, but if you can do your 2 cents and try to put yourself together a little bit, I think that it goes a long way. And I like to make sure that I'm someone that people can look at and say, okay, he makes this much money, or he's not an NHL player, he doesn't make millions of dollars, but I could still look like him, or I could still pull off something that he has at an attainable price. Because at the end of the day, my suits and everything, they're really not expensive at all. And up until this year, they were more suits, Value Village suits, whatever I could get my hands on, at anything lower than $100. Now starting to spend a little bit more, but still really nothing over, I'd be even saying $150 for a full piece suit. So I find bargain deals and try to dress myself as best as I can.
That's awesome. Who's got the worst style on the Thunderbirds game day attire?
Worst style? I don't know. That's a good one. Clark everyone's razzing Clark Peterson about his haircut right now, and it is kind of bad, but he always just throws himself together and shows up to the rink and balls out. So probably, let's say him for the sake of the argument right now, but I think I could help some people out.
Oh, that's awesome. And then one more question about the Thunderbirds. Who would be the biggest prankster on your team?
Phenomenal question. I want to say me, low key, because I want to be the prankster. Like, I want to be that guy, because I think it's hilarious, especially if no one knows who's doing it. But we don't really have anybody that does anything crazy. Like I said, the Dawsons, I think, used to do some stuff back in the day, but our team's too young right now to really even be able to get away with that stuff.
Is there anything that you've seen over your pro career, like that a prank's happened to a teammate, or that you've done to someone that kind of like it reminds you about the fun of lacrosse that you have with the brotherhood of the guys?
not necessarily a prank, but something that will, I think, always stick with people is Dan Lomas when we were in Rochester and after a game, just absolutely ripping the entire pant of his suit right on the butt line. And I think that that's something guys will never forget, but dancing at the bar, dropping it low and just tearing his entire pant.
That's awesome. We're going to get into a story here. I'm not sure how much you remember this, but one of my buddies, Brad Holbrow, he's from Sarnia as well. I guess you guys would go and play some pickup field games every once in a while. And this is when you were starting your MLL and NLL careers and you were making a big name for yourself. And I guess there was this junior B guy out there, lacrosse player, and he thought he was the best player in the world, and he looked you off the whole game. And I guess you went up to Brad Holbrow and kind of just mentioned to him, like, who is this guy? Like, is he going to pass me the ball or what's going on? And I guess Brad kind of ran him over with a big hit. Do you want to kind of tell us about maybe some pickup games of lacrosse that you've had in your past in Sarnia, or just kind of those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easier in the past than it is now. Living out in Halifax, it's kind of a massive trek to get back there. But I like to get back to Sarnia as much as I can and help give back to the lacrosse community as much as I can. But that story in general, like, I had no idea who this kid was, and I don't even think I still know who it was at the time. I might have forgot, but like when I go play these games and stuff, I'm not trying to do anything outrageous. Like I like to go have fun and I like to have a good time and catch up with people I haven't seen in a really long time. And for me, like I'm not out there being a ball hog running around trying to do absolutely ridiculous things. But I mean, I also expect that if I'm open, like pass me the ball and I'll probably give it back because I don't really want to score. Like go ahead, you can be the guy. But this kid was just looking me off the entire game, not even acknowledging the fact that I was ever even open. So I asked Brad, I was like, who the hell, like, why, who is this kid? What's he doing? Like, why is he not passing? Like, there's nothing going on. Just pass me the ball. Anyway, so Brad ran the kid over and put him in his place. But like I said, when I go back to Sarnia, like I just want to hang out, and a lot of it ends up being pickup games with my buddies. And so I want to make sure that they're having fun. Like they get to pick up the stick for the first time in a couple months. I want them to score the goal. I just want to give the pass back to them. This kid did not want that. Maybe he wanted to impress somebody. I don't know, but I wasn't getting the ball.
That's awesome. Maybe Derek Keenan or one of the coaches were out there watching, and he thought he could put on a show for them. We're gonna get into our final segment here. We're gonna talk about officials in the game of lacrosse. You've been around the game for a long time. I'm sure you've seen some of the abuse that officials have received over the course of your career. So we're gonna ask you who your favorite referee is and why.
I can't. The only name that even comes to mind is Ian Garrison, and I don't even. I like to say all the refs in general because I like to have a decent relationship. I don't like to piss any of the refs off because at the end of the day, if you can make a good friend with them, there's a higher chance you're going to get a call for you rather than against you. But I've always just tried to stay outside of that realm of the refs just because if they know my name, great. I don't need it to be anything more than that. I need them to respect me, but I don't need to be buddy. But the job that they do, especially at the NLL level, is absolutely ridiculous. One, they got to be in shape. They got to be able to run up and down the floor with some pretty high-end athletes. But they're always getting ridiculed for every single call. It doesn't even matter. I mean, I'm always screaming at the refs too. Just if Kersey's yelling at him, I'm yelling at him, and I get told to shut up all the time just for yelling. But like they do such a tremendous job. It's absolutely insane. And that's the one job I think I never in my life want is to be a ref at the minor level, pro level, any level. I will never even consider being a ref. So I have a lot of respect for those guys.
Yeah, certainly, and they do have a difficult job, and they have to manage the game, and sometimes games do tend maybe to get out of hand. Sometimes you've been a player again for most of your life, and is there any advice that you could offer to players or even coaches in the game of lacrosse to help limit the abuse towards the officials?
It's all about having fun. And if people are having fun, the whole experience is going to be better. And like I said, I talked to the Michigan group a couple of days ago, and the one thing I stressed to them and the coaching staff was just that if you want to be successful and you want to have lofty goals, great. But the only way to achieve those is through having fun. If you're not having fun, you're not going to want to pick up your stick. You're not going to want to go and enjoy playing the game of lacrosse, and everything's going to be a dread out there. Running, conditioning, lifting weights, everything's going to be dreadful on you. But you can find a way to go have fun. Your experience is going to be better. You're going to laugh a lot more, and you're going to enjoy hanging out with the refs after having a couple beers or something like that after the game.
Yeah, exactly. You touched on it there. Lacrosse is a game at the end of the day, and it's supposed to be fun. And we really do appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. And we hope to see you back out on the field or on the floor in the near future. And wish you the best of luck in your future career.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and obviously tremendous job. Thanks for putting this together.
Thanks, KJ.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Sticks and Picks Lacrosse podcast presented by Lacrosse Unlimited. Don't forget that you can check out their website at lacrosseunlimited.com for all your lacrosse needs. Lacrosse Unlimited is giving away the new True Vector lacrosse head along with the Staple Pigeon Unlimited shaft. You can check out our social media pages on Twitter and Instagram at SticksPicksLax and on Facebook at Sticks and Picks Lacrosse to find out more info on how to win the giveaway. A huge thank you to Lacrosse Unlimited and True Lacrosse for their awesome commitment in helping grow the game of lacrosse and sharing stories that many lacrosse fans haven't heard before. We are in the final round of our GOAT Challenge. Make sure you cast your vote for either John Tavares or John Grant Jr.